Hi, I'm Nick Mandoli with Visual South. Today we're going to look at a high-level overview of Infor Visual ERP. Before we begin our overview, let's take a look at the functional footprint of Visual. So starting over here on the left, this is just a personalized menu structure that I built for myself for the things that I use more often. But then looking at actual functional processes, for engineering and manufacturing, we have full engineering change control to manage any changes to documents, bills of manufacture and routings, work orders, and quotes and things like that that are on the floor. Resource and equipment maintenance, that's both internal and external. So if you want to create maintenance jobs for maintaining machinery in your shop or equipment that you own and being able to apply material and labor to that, along with having it affect the schedule if you're working on a machine and want to affect the schedule. But also you can manage customers' equipment if you sell them capital equipment as an example, and you can create maintenance plans for those. Quality, there's a basic quality that comes with the core system that allows you to do in-process inspections and measurements. And then of course for those shops that are ISO certified or have other regulatory requirements, we have a full Infor quality management system which integrates with the ERP to be able to manage that part of your quality system. There's also a project and aerospace and defense module for Infor Visual. That is for folks that need to do work breakdown structures or milestone billing and being able to track multiple things beside just work orders in one cost bucket. On the sales side, there is a CRM program that's available with Visual. Full functionality with that program. Orders for estimating and sales order management. And there's a product configurator for those companies that do configure to order. Anything from a simple features and options type configurator to a full rules-based parametric configuration of complex products. Customer grouping for those with parent-child relationships. Think Home Depot. You know, Home Depot is the parent and you want to collect to see how much you did for Home Depot, but you might ship to 10 subsidiaries or different locations of Home Depots, but you want to be able to report by the parent group. On the scheduling side, a concurrent scheduler, which allows us to do not only a standard production schedule, but it also will allow me to create any number of what-if schedules to plan against, so I can compare what if I make changes to my schedule and what does that look like against what my standard production schedule might look like. Forward scheduling, backward scheduling, infinite and finite are all capable to do in the concurrent scheduler. And the scheduling window is a Gantt view of being able to look at what that scheduling output is and compare all of those different what-if schedules in that window to see the differences. A throughput window, great tool for analyzing the schedule along with sales, because throughput equals money. And it takes your sales orders and looks at the schedule and allows you to view what your throughput by day, week, month, end of month as a critical analytic would be. And the throughput window gives you all of that information along with identifying constraints and material shortages and such. Easy Lean and DBR, or drum buffer rope, that is also available as a scheduling option. It's just another way of scheduling your shop where instead of scheduling each individual resource or machine, you are really concentrating on just a constrained resource and then using buffers for the scheduler to decide when to release jobs. And it's really designed to release only what is required and schedule that way, as opposed to building stock and building jobs just to keep people busy. Inventory material planning window to run your material requirements planning, or MRP, and analyze the output of that, whether it's standard or advanced, and be able to mass place both production orders and purchase orders all from a single area. Serial and lot traceability, full functionality, cradle to grave, including the ability to create properties along with the trace identification and also make those properties that are attached to that trace profile required or editable along the way, so you can have more information related to a trace to use. Very handy tool for people that have very complex trace requirements. Interbranch transfer, multi-site capable, so you can transfer between locations and between sites. And a cost simulation. If you're changing your standards, for instance, and you want to see what the effect of those standards would be before you actually apply it to the database and to your standard costs, then you can run simulations to see if you want to make those changes or not. On the purchasing side, full supply chain capability and receiving inspection. That is a nice piece that either integrates with Infor quality management if you want to do everything within the full controlled quality system, or you can just do simple inspections where any items that come in getting received to an inspection location, and an inspector just does his measurements, accepts the items, and marks them for being cleared to go to inventory. Services is outside service management. Think value added during a work order. So you perform certain operations on a job, and then it goes to an outside service for a value add. Let's say it's heat treat or painting. Visual will manage that via purchase orders and dispatches so that you can send those out, and the cost gets directly costed to that work order when it gets received back in and invoiced from your vendor. Same thing with vendor group maintenance, being able to create parent and child relationships, and the ability to look at supplier performance. How are they doing on time in full for my suppliers? Are they delivering on the dates that they're supposed to be delivering? Are they delivering in full? Shop floor. Our shop floor mobile capability is for mobile devices being able to be run on the floor so people can do material transactions while traveling around the warehouse or the shop floor. They can do their labor transactions. You can do purchase receipts, shipping entry, physical inventory counts, cycle counts. All of that is available in the shop floor mobile capability, which is a really nice tool set. And if you just want to do labor collection, clock in, clock out of jobs, clock in, clock out for the day, there is a wedge labor collection system to do that. Most people will use the shop floor mobile device though. There's also a visual time and attendance program, which allows you to do all of your HR type needs, tracking vacations, time off, and in-outs to be able to send data to your payroll provider. Full financial package, we're not going to cover much of that in the demos. That could be covered separately. It has full capabilities on the financial side. And then there's some executive tools. Throughput window, which is the same as what we talked about here with the scheduling, but it's a great tool for an executive to get a bird's eye view, actually even deeper than a bird's eye view, of the dollar amount going through the shop and what's going to ship and how that affects your sales. And of course, there's a dashboard where you can have your own personalized analytics available to you. Generally, that's going to be your start or home page with the analytics on the dashboard that you would use. Workflow tracker. The system has full workflow capability. If this happens, then do this or notify that person. You have a tracker from an executive standpoint where they can look and see where any particular item or job or order is in the workflow process. And administration, that's just setting up full security at the menu, table, and field level for all of your users. And of course, tools and utilities to do different things with the database, including notification maintenance, which is a really nice tool that we'll touch on as we go into the demo. Next, we'll look at how easy it is to navigate and personalize our experience in Visual. I'm going to use my customer order entry screen just as an example to show how we can personalize and navigate through the system. Much of what I show here can be used throughout the system. I'm just using this form as an example. So some of the things that we can do with this is we have columns in our customer order form as an example, and I have the ability to move these columns around, change the sizes of them. The other thing I can do is actually go in and configure those lines and either include or uncheck them to exclude them from the list. I have the ability also to change what that column might say. So for example, not that I would do this, but maybe my quantity field, I would want to say QTY ordered, just as an example. So I can rename the label on that. So my quantity field is now quantity ordered, as you see here. Now I got to stretch it open a little bit more to see that whole thing and then save that configuration with anything that I've moved or changed. So the other thing that I can do is with the search functionality is anytime I have a magnifying glass next to a field, that means I can search all of the data within that field. If I click on that as an example, you can see these are all of my customer orders. I can begin filtering through that either using my quick filter, which means I can just open up a line here and start typing. Maybe I want everything that starts with a B, for example. Or use my wildcards and I know it has an IG in it. and it finds that same record. Maybe it's BL in there, and there's my Abelman. So the ability to use wildcards and quickly filter and find what you're looking for, or on certain fields, they're drop-downs, so I can choose from the drop-down list to show all my released orders. And then, of course, once I have that, I can just double-click on any of these to load it into my form. And it keeps this record in the background for me, so it gives me the ability to scroll through that search set without coming back to the search screen in my form. Same thing here. I can modify this form to add fields and change these column names if I wanted to. What I like to do in forms like this is having the ability to edit these columns and add columns to it. For example, I'm looking here at a customer ID, but maybe I don't know what that ID is, or maybe I'm using a numerical ID that really isn't a smart ID, and I really need to know what the customer's name is. So I would just come to my list here, because it shows me all the fields related to the customer order and allows me to enter that here. So I'm going to come and find my customer name from the list and add that to it. There's my name, so I'm just going to check that to add it, and I'm going to leave the name. I could say, maybe I want to call it the customer name, and hit my check, and now I have that on my list. And I can make my box bigger and stretch that field out so that I can see the full name here. The nice thing about this is it becomes an ad hoc utility, because I can now create a filter. Well, I already have it filtered on released orders, so maybe that's a report. Show me all of my released orders. And maybe a better example, I would add maybe an order date or due date or something on there. But just as an example, I just filter on what I am looking for, add the fields that I want to see, and then I can export that out to Excel, and it will give me that in a spreadsheet, and that's an ad hoc report. The nice thing about that, though, is if I do that often and search on this and I want to keep that, I can create a profile. So I can create a profile, maybe I'll call it released orders. And if I wanted to, make that one the default, whenever I opened it up, I can choose that box. But saving those profiles allows me then to come in and open up any number of profiles that I may have created. That's the only one I did here, but I can have an infinite number of profiles sorted and with different filters on them that gives me different data with different names, and pull those up and shoot them out to Excel. So it's a quick way that anybody without IT support can create ad hoc reports to send out to Excel. The other ability I have is to create what we call user definable tabs. So the system comes with certain tabs, but we always know that some customers may have a need for other information that might not come with it. So we have the ability to add our own tabs to this. For instance, I added this compliance tab, and I created a list format in here that allows me to choose a piece of data from the list. Throughout the system, we have these drill buttons. So anytime you see a record that has an arrow in the field, you simply click on that arrow and it will take you to the source record behind that. In this case, it was part ID A8000, so it brings me to the part maintenance for that particular item. And now I have the ability to change the way I like to look at some forms. For example, in part maintenance, I have these view panels, which show me more information about it. This one's showing me some inventory information, and I can either hide that if I don't care to see that if I wanted to, or I can change it. Maybe I like to look at it in a graph view versus just that detail, or maybe I like grid mode. So depending on how you like to see that data, you can change that view. Another thing that we have the ability to do is, we showed the graphical menu in the beginning, but we also have a personal menu. And our personal menu could be used anywhere in the system, and I can force it to stay on top so it's always there. I would have this, first of all, it would be set by security, so you would only be able to get to menu items that you had the security rights to get to. I'm an administrator, so I have all of it, but I could still even modify this and remove or add things that may or may not come out of the box with it. So it's a great way to navigate through the system. Collaboration with customers and team members is both vital and core to Infor Visual ERP. We have several collaboration tools within Infor Visual ERP, so we're just going to walk through a few of those. The first one being the workflow. So I'm going to go into the workflow designer just to show how easy it is to create standard workflows in just about every functional area within the visual system. I'm going to look at this purchase order workflow because that's usually a good example. You can see this is a purchase order authorization and release flow. What it really does is we have a starting point, the PO entry is created, and then we have two directions it could go. If the status of that purchase order is firmed, it's going to go in this direction. If it's released, it goes in this direction. And then we're telling it what happens when it reaches those steps. And behind each one of these, this here is a rule and this is a step. So if I look at what the rule is, it's really simple. You're just stating that the purchase order status is released. And same thing, so over here it would be the same thing, except of course it would be firmed. So real easy to create those rules. You don't need to be a programmer or extremely technical to be able to do these things. I can also add authorizations. So not only does it need to meet that criteria, and it doesn't even have to have any criteria, the authorization could be the criteria, but only these users or this group of users would be able to see that flow. And then at the step, it just says what happens when we get to that step. And here you can see the message that comes up is this will pop up on the user screen when they save that purchase order, and it'll let them know that a purchase manager authorization has to be approved and a task has been sent to the purchase manager. And in this case, it's just sending a task through the visual task system, so the manager would see it on his task list or in his Windows task maintenance bar also, but it could also be an email to that person or both. So you can copy both. You can also send documents with it. So if there's a document that needs to go with that particular workflow, you can attach documents to that. It's just a matter of dragging these steps out onto the board, the different sizes and shapes that you want. You can resize them all and do what you want with those. And then of course just dragging the rule line between them and defining what that rule is. So very easy. You can use workflows to send messages, emails, tasks, or create stops. So you could just pop up a message that stops the process of something and says something else has to happen before you can continue. Another thing that we can do here is something called notification maintenance. And for that, what I'm going to use is an example of a customer order entry where we would create a notification. You can create notifications just about anywhere also in most document type windows. So in here, if I look at my notifications, what I can do is I have email notifications that are for external folks like customers, for example, or vendors if you're talking about a purchase order in that case. But here you say, what do I want to happen when to send an email? So I can either send it on a new order, a changed order, or a shipment. It'll send out that notification to that customer. I can send internal notifications for folks on my team on the different things that happen. Or I can say notify me, which says any change to this order that happens, I would like to be notified. So all along the way, I'm tracking it and knowing when something changes or when it gets shipped or invoiced. The other thing that we have is something called activities and activity maintenance. So I can just open up activity maintenance and assign it to any number of different functional areas and create an activity. I'll use customer order, but again, it could be any number of different forms within the system. And an activity, think of as a way to notify other people or create reminders or tasks. And by default, it's reminding myself, but I can assign this to other people. So whether I want an activity created for myself or for others, I simply decide who that is, put a due date on it and a start date, and I can have a number of activities. So if I have a number of different tasks I want, I can create several activities for the same record. As a subject line, of course, and then it's going to track activity types and categories, what the status is, whether it's in process, completed. It'll track that along the way and allow you to update that status if you want to. And then if you want to track estimated hours for that activity. But usually, something like a follow-up would be good for this. Works real well like in the estimating window, for example. You send out an estimate and then you want to follow up on that estimate. You could create activities to generate those follow-up tasks. And once that's all completed in there, the user, and if I go to my menu here, can have a list of their activities that have been assigned to them, and they'll see that list of their activities and know what it is that they need to do. So it's like a to-do list. And I can sort this by statuses also, so I only see my open activities. But the nice thing here is that I can jump right to the record that activity is for and go into that and look at it. It also ties into the CRM tasks and activities. So if I'm working in the CRM product, I would see these tasks over there also. So it's not just within the ERP side of the fence that you would create those activities for. If you are on the sales side and you work in CRM, you can work in there also. Let's take a look at some examples of how we can use dashboards to track key performance analytics in Visual. As a functional user, visual dashboards would be used as a home page or a start page. I have my personal menu over here on the left for the things that I do most often or need to get quick links to, whether it's certain activities or reports. And my dashboards for a user are very easy to create and personalize for the user's functions. I have mine set for administrative functions, so I'm looking at different areas of the system, from sales and AR to purchasing and AP, and I have some production information in the middle. And what you're seeing is a mix of just standard charts and detail grids. The charts that you're looking at, that you choose, all have detail grids behind them. So if I was to simply choose and click on any one of these bars, it'll show me the detail that's making up that particular analytic. The detail grid is also just a grid that comes from a chart if I wanted to. So I could have just put a chart here and then clicked into it and gotten to the same detail. There's some information that I like to look at in grid view versus a chart view. Adding charts or detail grids is very simple. Visual has pre-defined charts and grids that I can simply come up here and add. I can use a system analytic, which is one that's already pre-built, or analytics that you don't have available to you here that you do want. You can actually create your own and customize a detail grid or analytic. So I'm just going to say OK, and then I just choose from my list what I want to see. I'm going to choose my estimated versus projected. I can set some filter criteria on how I like to see that, choose the different statuses that I want to see on it, and just say OK. And then I can place this wherever I want and resize other analytics to fit this one in. But the nice thing about it is I can see from a holistic standpoint what my estimated versus projected costs are running through my shop. So I can see my projected costs are higher than my estimated. This isn't actually too bad, but if I saw a big difference, that would cause me some concern and want me to drill in. And again, I could just click on this, and what this is showing is really the same grid that we're looking at over here. I just chose to put the grid view on there instead of the chart. Same thing with if I wanted to add just a detail grid. It's the same process, but now I would add a detail as opposed to the chart. So very easy for any user to create those out-of-the-box analytics and put them on their screen to use. They can be updated live, so as data changes live in the database, you would see your updates here with a simple refresh. Just as well, you can set it on a timer. If you only want this to refresh maybe once a day or every hour, however you want that, it could run on a scheduled time. You can save many different dashboards. So you can create a dashboard that everybody can see and save it to all users, or you can create the dashboard just for you. But you can choose from multiple dashboards if you wanted to. Maybe you had several analytics that you like to look at, and instead of trying to put it all on a single screen, you can create several dashboards on multiple screens and use it that way. But dashboards are a great homepage, great way to analyze what's going on in your particular area and drill into the data from that. And as you can see from these detail grids, I can then drill directly into the source behind those records. Setting a proper foundation in a manufacturing environment is critical to Infor Visual ERP. Let's take a look. Before we go into some functional overviews, what we want to do is just set a foundation so some of the functions that tie together will make a little bit more sense if we show you how we engineer an item as an example. And this is going to be a brief overview. We're not going to go into very deep detail, but it'll give you a good understanding. I'm going to go into my part maintenance, and the part we're going to be looking at is called A8000, so I'm just going to put that in here. And you can see I have a view panel which gives me some inventory information. and other details related to this part. We're not going to go into too much detail here. We just want to show that we can capture costs, which are really imported from the bill of material and routing that we're going to show you here in just a second. But from here, the main point of this is a fabricated item that we're building, and I want to show you the structure of the bill of material and the routing that we're going to use to build this. So to get to it, I'm just going to go, we have a part and we have an engineering master, engineering ID. And the reason we have these IDs is because I may have several different ways of building this same part, so I can have several masters. For instance, if I'm in a multi-site organization and 2 sites build the same product, they may build it differently, so you might have 2 different engineering masters for it. And this is an alphanumeric field, so, you know, for example, maybe I make one of these in a site in the USA and one in a site in Mexico, so I may have an engineering ID called USA and one called MEX. But here it's just 0, which is generally the default. I'm going to click on that little arrow to drill into it, and you'll notice that this is going to look different than what most other systems would look like. Because it's a visual format, which is where visual originally got its name from. But the nice thing about this visual format is I can see a lot of information right off the bat without having to really concentrate on this bill. The top item here in white, that is my finished good item. The yellow cards represent raw materials or sub-assemblies that I might be pulling from stock. The blue cards represent operations or resources where the work is being done, and notice one is a little darker blue, which represents an outside resource. So I'm doing the work internally up to operation number 60, and then it goes out for heat treating to a vendor. It comes back for inspection, and then of course we have another material here in yellow. And the nice thing about this is these materials are associated with the operation that it gets consumed at. And the schedule uses that because it knows in some big assemblies like this especially that, hey, you don't need this bearing at the beginning of the job. So if the schedule is running and it says you don't have this bearing, it may say, well, you don't need it for a week because it'll be a week before it gets to the assembly operation. So it'll still allow you to begin the scheduling of that item. Over here are what we call legs or sub-assemblies. So very quickly, just, you know, again, visually looking at this, I can tell I have 2 sub-assemblies associated to this main assembly. And they're both associated at operation number 60, the welding operation. So those are materials or assemblies that are required at the weld step that are going to be welded together. And I can see that each of these has their own individual bill of material and routing to go with it. They can be completely separate when I build these, and I can build them to stock, and they would just show up as a yellow card over here if I wanted to do that. But in this detail, I'm basically saying I build these only for the main product when it's ordered. So they're build to order sub-assemblies, not stocked sub-assemblies. And I can open up each one of these cards. So I can open it up and see the detail behind that header, and, you know, see how my scheduling has worked, who engineered it, and so on when it was engineered. See some drawings. I can have documents associated. I can have as many documents associated with this as I want, and this is throughout Visual, by the way. This is just one example of where it might be used. I could have work instructions, for example, but work instructions I would tie to the actual operation card. So I would open up my material card, and here's where I enter the quantity per, any scrap, who the vendor is, if it's a purchased item, any planning information, reference designators for folks that are in the electronics industry, and so on. Same thing with my operations. I can just double click on that, open that up, and here's some work instruction that will print on a traveler or show up on the shop floor mobile labor collection device out on the floor if they're using that. So there's really no need for paper. But I track my setup hours, my runtime, and of course these are the things associated with this resource that is calculating the cost. It knows that this resource in the background has a hourly cost, an hourly burden or overhead, and it multiplies that by the hours that we said it takes to produce that part, multiplied by quantity. Lots of other things I can do with this. I can have concurrent resources and so on. We're not going to go that deep into it with our overview. We'll talk about it a little bit maybe in the scheduling part, but that is generally what we call an engineering master. In Visual, we have the ability to track an order's full life cycle from quote to cash. To take a quick full life cycle view of managing orders, we're just going to use a sales order as an example. I'm going to go into my customer order entry, and I'm going to pull up order 3000. And on order 3000, I can see, first of all, just looking at the order, I get a quick look at what my customer's credit limit is on this order. So this is very handy when I'm taking a new order, because as soon as I put that customer ID in, I can see, are they above their credit limit? Are they in good standing? And here I can see in my demo database, everybody's going to be over their credit limit because nobody pays me. And over on the right-hand side, I get some other good information. Now I'm looking at the part view. So whichever part on whichever line on the order I'm looking at, I can see a quick inventory view of what's on hand, what's in demand for that item, how much is actually available for MRP, because I may have some in other sites that are not available to the particular site that I'm working in, and so on. Down here is another great feature. I can see, just looking at that line item, what my current gross profit and projected costs are going to be for that item. So I can see that my profit so far is good, but it may be going down. This job isn't complete yet. It's still in process. But I can see what my estimated cost is versus my projected cost, which projected cost is basically how much work I've put in it and materials I've put in it. So labor and materials already applied to it, plus what's still estimated remaining, and that comes out to my projected cost. So I can see my sell price. So far I'm below my sell price, which is good, but the closer I get to that, obviously my profit will start moving down. But I can see all of that right here on the screen, and so it's real good information right off the bat just looking at this order. The other thing I can do here now is go drill into that actual job and look at it. So remember earlier we had looked at an engineering master, which shows our bill of material and our routing all in one. Here is that same engineering master, but converted to a work order. So it's in process, and I can see it's work order 3000. There's my part number that I'm building, a quantity of 10. And looking at this, I know that my yellow cards again are my material, my blue cards are my operations, and my darker blue or slightly darker blue is my outside services that I need. In this case, this is heat treating. And then I have my sub-assemblies over here. The other great thing I see in this visual representation is statuses. This dark blue line going across my yellow card, for example, that means that that yellow card or that material, this flat stock, has been issued 100% because the line goes all the way across. Same thing with these operations. The labor operations are complete in the cutoff saw and the brake. And I can see that it's about halfway complete through the drill operation. So just looking at this, I know where this job is. If I come over and look at my sub-assemblies, same thing. I can tell that half the material has been issued of this round stock. It hasn't all been issued. And about a quarter of that cutoff saw has been completed so far. Same thing over here on my other sub-assembly. The other thing I see here are these red outlines on the card. That means that somebody is currently logged into this job. And I can easily see that information if I simply go up to my info and take a look at my labor tickets. I can see all labor tickets when I first open this. I can look at individual labor tickets by clicking on each card, so I can see all the labor that's been applied to each one of these operations. Or I might say, only show me my in-process labor tickets. So if I'm looking at, in this case, I can see that there's a red outline, so I know I have an in process there, and I can see Allison Peterman is currently logged into that. I can see that Andy Rothwell is logged into this, and then I have Bill Douglas over here. So great information to be able to see all of that labor information and how much time is spent and how much quantity they've done. Same thing with materials. I can drill into my materials that have been issued and see what quantities have been issued of each of the materials. The other great thing here is costs. Here I can see what my ongoing costs real time are. So I have an estimated, which is what I told it originally in that engineering master. I estimated that the material should cost this much and my labor times should be this much with setup and run times. And if I want to drill that open, I just click on that estimated header or column, and it drills it open. So now that I can break it down into unit cost and then see what my material, labor, burden, and service costs are. And then I can compare that to what my actuals are. Even though this job is not complete, I can still see at current state where I'm having problems. And I'm looking for these reds here, and I can see I have several red areas where I have variances. So I can drill in and find out, why is it taking longer than what I estimated there? And the job is not done, so it gives me a chance to react prior to the job being completed. Maybe I can help curtail some of that variance before it's completed. Back to my customer order, the other thing I can do here is go and look at the document lifecycle. So here's where I take it a full 360, and I can see that it shows me the life cycle of this entire order. So it started with quote 3,000. That quote turned into sales order 3,000. They don't have to necessarily be the same ID, by the way. We just do that in a demo database, so it's easy to understand. And then it had a work order associated with that line item for 3,000. And just to show how deep this can go, I'm going to just pull up sales order 02008, because this has multiple lines on it. And if we look at the same thing, or if we look at our document lifecycle, here we can see it from quote 1005. There's my turned into that sales order 2008. I can see it's closed, and it has a status bar across it. Here are the 3 line items that had work orders allocated to those line items, so I know the actual work order that produced those lines. And I can see one of those was canceled void before it was completed. So I might dig into that. I can see the shipment, the pack list, turned into this invoice 6003 MFG. And then I could see the payments for that invoice. And at any one of these stages, I can double click and drill into any one of these pieces of information if I wanted to find out more. This is great because at any stage, whether I'm at the payment, the invoice, depending on what I know, maybe a customer calls, says, hey, I have this invoice number, but I don't know what order. So if I'm in invoice entry and I enter that invoice and I do the same thing and go to document lifecycle, it will pull up this same lifecycle where from the invoice ID, I could see everything else associated with it. So I know what order it came from. I know what quote it came from. I know the jobs that produced it. So just great information to be able to tie everything together there. Thing that I have, we showed that cost screen on the work order itself. Here's that detail grid of my estimated versus projected, and this shows a very similar information to that, except I'm seeing all of my work orders here. So this is great information because now I'm looking for those variances and I can filter or sort on that field. So maybe I want to bring all my negative variances up to the top and find out what's going on with those. And I can dig into those and maybe say, I don't want to look at my closed ones. That's already happened. That I do want to investigate that. But if I want to see what's going on right now on the floor, look at my released orders only and see the ones that have variances going on, because I still might be able to help out with that before the job is finished. So all just great information, the way that all ties together. Visual takes production scheduling to another level. It uses it to also analyze and project sales throughput. Scheduling Visual is very flexible. We have the ability to both backward schedule and forward schedule finitely or infinitely, or any combination of any of those. I've already run the concurrent scheduler, which was what generally will run overnight or manually whenever you want during the day if you decided to. And that runs all of the schedules. Just to talk about all of the schedules, you have the ability not only to run a standard schedule for each site individually, separately, you also have the ability to have as many what-if schedules for all of those sites. So if you wanted to, let's say, see what would happen if you ran overtime 2 hours a day for the next month, or maybe I want to run on Saturdays, or add a machine or more resources to some areas, or what if I took resources from one area and put them on another area for a month? You have the ability to be able to run all of those together and be able to compare that what if directly to the standard schedule and see if it makes a difference or where the differences are made. I've found in many cases that sometimes you realize that adding capacity in a bottleneck doesn't necessarily remove the bottleneck, it just moves it somewhere else. So after the schedule runs, we look at the results in the scheduling window, which is a Gantt chart layout. It lets us see where all the capacity is for each of the different resources, whether they're machines or individuals or people, the number of shifts, 1, 2, or 3, the number of units of capacity we have in each of those. So we can see, just by looking at this visually, what our capacity looks like in each of those areas. Highlighted in red are my late orders, blue are on time. Now if I wanted to compare that to a what if, My example that I'm going to use is in my drilling department to see what would happen if I added 3 shifts on the drill instead of just a single 8-hour shift, which is what I see in the white area here. So I have a what if schedule called Sandbox. I'm just going to load that, and it's going to add it to this window. And now I can see, looking at the drill, I have all of this added capacity. And if I click on one of these units, I can see that where before I added capacity, that job or that operation was being performed out here on the 10th, and now it's moved to today, the 7th. So I can tell right away that I am getting better on that job. So it's a great way to compare right on the screen here where the capacity is changing. The other great tool we have is called the Throughput window. And the Throughput window is really comparing many things, but one of the really good things is it compares what the value going through the shop is according to the schedule. So we can see what that customer service impact is based on the schedule. How much are we going to ship in a certain time frame? So I'm looking at my standard schedule. Again, I can compare multiple schedules and choose to see if I want to, compare standard to my Sandbox and see what the impact of that change that I made was. And here you could see, changing that one drill operation, even though it moved some jobs ahead in the schedule, it really didn't impact my customer service. So I may decide it's not worth doing it. Even though it was telling me I could do jobs sooner, it wasn't necessarily getting them out the door and shipped any sooner. So I'm going to go back and look at my standard schedule, and here I can see what the value late is. Now I'm looking at my late jobs, I'm looking at date buckets, and if I want to drill into any of these, I can just drill in and see what customer orders with the related supply IDs are, what the throughput date is, meaning what date is expected to finish through the shop, and what the value of those jobs are. So it's really great information to be able to see what changes are not only impacting what you feel the schedule in the shop is, but how are they affecting the sales? Because that's, in the end, that's the most important thing, is how quickly am I getting these sales through the shop. Some other things I can do here, if I wanted to look at contention, which is bottlenecks, I can see that I have my most constrained resource is my cutoff saw, and then my brake and so on. And if I want to see what's actually in those, I can drill in and see all of the jobs going through those particular resources. Again, a great place where you can see the differences between, how my standard schedule looks versus my Sandbox. Materials also, I can see. It's similar to contention. It's going to show me which materials are causing constraints, because not only is resources a constraint, but a material not being available with a long lead time can be a constraint. Utilization is another great tool. Having a constraint is one thing, but having underutilized resources could be another, and it can actually help with the constraint. Maybe I could move some of these underutilized resources over into the overutilized resources. But again, I have the ability to drill into and see what the status is of all of those utilized resources. So really great information all coming from the schedule. Expected throughput is a great one. Here's where I can see what dollar value I'm expected to come through on certain dates. Similar to the customer service, except now I'm looking at, future also and seeing, can I get more out of it? And expected throughput by resource is also a good one, because now I can drill down not to the full order, which I would see in the expected throughput, but I can track down to the individual resource. So throughput is a great tool that Visual has that is fairly unique to the Infor Visual ERP. Now that we have a schedule, the other great thing we can do is when we're at customer order entry, without even creating an order, I don't have to identify a customer or anything else here. I just want to check availability. So I'm just going to add a new line, and I'll just say use my A8000. And of course I get instant information about that part, because maybe I already have it on hand. So there's my availability, but perhaps I don't. I'm going to say maybe they're ordering 10, and the ship date, the customer is on the phone with me and they're asking for it on 1/31/21. Okay, so without saving this, without doing anything else, while I'm on the phone with the customer, I have the ability now to check my schedule availability. And this is going to run it against the existing schedule. There's my 1/31 want date that I put in, my quantity of 10. I can change that here too if I wanted to just run different scenarios. but I'm just going to hit the schedule button, and it's coming back, and I can tell already that I can't do it on 131. It's the earliest I could do it is 222. So right off the bat, I can tell the customer that this is the date I can do without having to tell them, yes, I can do 131 and call them back later and tell them that, no, it's going to be late. This is banging it against the actual schedule. This is not using lead times like a lot of other systems may do. It's using the actual constraints, the available resources, available capacity, and it's checking material availability. So if I'm missing material, it's running through those checks. Do I have the material? Is there a plan for the material? Is there a purchase order? What's the due date of the purchase order? So it's checking all of that for me to come up with what that scheduled finish date is while I'm on the phone with the customer potentially. Material requirements planning in Visual makes it easy for both production planners and buyers to manage their day. For material planning and material requirements planning within Visual, we're going to run this from our material planning window. And generally, MRP, or Material Requirements Planning, will run overnight, and it calculates all of your supply and demand and comes up with planned orders that you need. So on the screen over here on the left, I'd be looking at all my demand and all of my supply needs over here on the right. And the projected quantity is basically that net amount between demand and supply as dates go on. We have two ways of looking at this. The first way is what you see here on this main window. You can see part by part here, and all of the demand and supply for an individual item and all of the planning policies and warehouse amounts, quantities, and all of that. I can do a quick search here. And since let's say I'm searching for purchased items that I need to release from planned orders, or show me all the planned orders for purchase parts that are due to be released within the next 5 days, which means, everything that I should be releasing in 5 days to get within the lead time of that item on time. So if it's due in 10 days and has a lead time of 5 days, it should be released sometime within the next 5 days to get on time, to give enough for that 10-day lead time. So I'm just going to search that, and here I get a list of all of those items. And the nice thing here is I'll just start at the top and work my way through the list. So I can see here my demand for this is actually a work order for 0138. I can click on my arrow here to drill into that work order if I wanted to investigate. I can see I need it on 12/14, and the status is firmed of that particular work order. My projected quantity is 2,965 because I have a planned order that was created for 3,000. And the reason it's 3,000 and not the 25 that I need is because, and in this case, I actually have a negative on-hand quantity, which we would usually not want that, but there are some cases where that is something that you need to deal with, and we want to make sure that we cover that negative quantity also. But I can see that our min-maxes and multiples of are in units of 1,000, so a minimum of 1,000 and in multiples of 1,000. I don't have a max, so if I need 25, it's going to order 1,000. If I have a 2,000 safety stock and I need 25, that means I really need 2,025. So since I have that multiples of 1,000, it's ordering 3,000 for me. So to release that order, I just simply highlight it, hit my firm release planned order. It knows who my vendor is. I can change that vendor if I want to from my drop down. I can change the quantity and the dates if I want, and then just hit order. It will generate a purchase order for me. I'm not going to do that right here because I'm also going to show what we call our advanced mode. And in advanced mode, now we're working in buckets, but we're not working one part at a time. I can do one part at a time if I want, but the nice thing about this is the ability to mass plan. So I choose a date bucket, and I'll choose 12/10. Today's 12/7, so that would be everything from 12/4 to 12/10 within my date bucket of 12/10 for release dates. So I just highlight the bucket that I want to see all the orders that I should be releasing. I hit my firm planned release order button, and this shows me everything. So now I can start filtering. Do I want to filter by product code, commodity code, planner, buyer, fabricated or purchased? I'm just going to choose purchased for now and leave it at that. But down on the bottom, I'm seeing all of the items or all of my materials that MRP ran and said you have a shortage on, and we're suggesting you release a planned order for this amount. So I can go through these. I can see who the vendor is. Again, I can change the vendor, dates, quantities here if I want to, but the really nice thing about this is I can combine all of my purchase orders. So I can choose to consolidate orders by vendor. So when I see Hookset Steel and Precision Electronics here, if I was to release all of those just by selecting them here and highlighting them and dragging down, It would create 2 purchase orders for me, one with 2 line items for Precision Electronics and one with, 6 or 7 line items for Hookset Steel Company. So I can go through and decide which I want, and I can skip certain lines. Maybe I look at some lines and say, well, I really don't want those. Those are maybe for trying to replenish safety stock, and I can do those at another time. So you just select what you want, simply hit the order button, and it's going to go out and create purchase orders for all of those. And that's as easy as that. I go and print those purchase orders, send them to the vendor, or email them to the vendor automatically. So that's a great way of using this screen, and notice how those drop off. So this is really a big to-do list for the purchasing person. Same thing with fabricated orders. It works the same way for releasing shop floor orders. So doing this the same way, I am creating work orders instead of purchase orders. Same thing, just hit order and it's creating those work orders for me automatically. So instead of having to do one at a time, I am mass releasing both purchase orders and work orders. A real easy way to work through production and purchasing. The other thing I can do with this, which we're not going to go through, but there's a lot more functionality within the advanced window for forecasting and demand fence planning and things such as that. So lots of functionality, including planning by exception message if you want to just plan for items that are short or items that are overstocked, possibly. Maybe I have overstocked purchase orders and I want to change the due dates on them because I don't really need them anymore. Managing production transactions on the shop floor is easy with Visual Shop Floor Mobile. I have a menu item here for my Shop Floor Mobile program, but generally this is going to run as a standalone application out on the shop floor for those users. It really is separate. It's a web-based application to be mobile and resizable depending on the device, so it could run on a PC or a tablet or even a phone. So I'm just going to launch it from here, and it's launching my browser. And from a labor standpoint, this is where the workers on the floor are just going to clock in for the day. And I'm clocked in as Allison Peterman. And of course, I'm using this on a computer that doesn't have a scanner, so I'm just going to be typing most things in, but I can switch it to scan mode, which basically would put every one of the forms into a scan mode where you just make one scan of a barcode and it will fill in the entire form with paper on the floor. But you could certainly go paperless also. So we're just going to show some of the high-level overview of what we can do with the Shop Floor Mobile. Starting with runs. We're going to run a job. Basically, we just choose the job that we're running. And again, if I was in scan mode, I would just scan one barcode and it would fill all of this in. I'm just manually doing this for now. You can see I'm logging into the drill operation. And then I would just submit, and that would log me into that job and start the clock, start measuring time, and I would come back later and just create a end transaction. I'm not going to start that, but you see how easy that is, and the purpose of this whole application is really to make it easy and very intuitive for the folks out on the shop floor to do their labor and material transactions. So another thing we can do here, which is really nice, is the scheduling piece. Think of the shop floor foreman out on the floor, or even the workers. If they were doing paperless, they could use this as an electronic dispatch report and use this instead of paper. So I would choose the department that I'm working in. You can also set preferences to default to the department for particular users. But if I'm, for instance, working in the cutoff saw department, I can click on that department and see all of the jobs that are scheduled in that department. So this is in the order that the schedule ran and said I can do them in. But as a foreman, I might look in here and say, you know what, this is a higher priority because it's a priority 2 versus no priority here. So I can just drag this right on up to the top. So when my workers are in here looking at this dispatch, now they see it in the order that I want it done in. So I can move this around any way I want. The nice thing about this is I do have these little indicators that let me know that this is an overdue operation, so it's late according to the schedule already. I do have my materials that are required for it, and the material from the previous operation is there, and there's no labor connected to it yet. If this was filled in, I can tell if somebody was actually logged in, and it would have their name underneath, by the way. And I can see if there's documents available, so I can easily come in and look at the documents that are associated with this. And I can also look at specifications, which are possibly work instructions. So I don't need a piece of paper to come out to the floor with me. So it's a great tool to be able to use out on the shop floor. Work order materials, basically, you're just the material handler going around, and that will size on a phone or a smaller tablet or a RF device so that you can scan your materials and issue them to jobs and move them around the warehouse. Purchase receiving, physical inventory is great. You can do full physical counts and count tags with the device, along with sending out shipments. WIP is something that is a really nice feature that a lot of systems don't have, because when items go into WIP, whether it's materials or sub-assemblies, a lot of times they're lost because there's not necessarily an inventory location for those items. So this whole WIP functionality allows you to track where that material is, and it also allows you to create a to-do list or a task list for the material handler. So when a job comes out off an operation out on the shop floor, the user can actually create a move request when they complete their labor ticket. And that move request then turns into a material handler queue. So the material handler always has this queue letting him know what jobs came off of operations that are ready to be picked up and moved to the next operation. So it's a great way to track where that WIP material is, and for the material planner to know when he needs to pick things up and move them to the next operation, so they don't sit at an operation when completed. And that's a quick overview of the shop floor mobile application. Visual has a full financial suite. We're just going to take a quick look and highlight a few of those things, such as payables three-way matching, cash flow management, and GL report writer. And then last but not least, we'll take a quick look at the project and A&D functionality within Visual. This is for companies that use work breakdown structures or do milestone billing and revenue recognition. Performing a three-way match in payables in Visual is very easy. The first thing we would do is go and set up how we want our vendor to be set up for a three-way match. We have options to choose whether we want no matching at all, meaning our purchase order does not need to match the invoice amount, or we can say it has to match exactly, or we can choose a range. So we could say it could be plus a certain percent or minus a certain percent. In our example, we're going to be using A1 sheet metal, which actually has a range of plus 10% and minus 20%. So if we go to our invoice entry, in our example, we'll assume we already have a purchase order that's out there and that purchase order has been received. So that's two parts of the three-way match. And now we're creating the voucher to create that third part. So the first thing we would do here is just identify who our vendor is that we're using. And then I'm just going to hit F6 on my keyboard, which is just a shortcut to open up my search screen. But the search is going to be filtered by the vendor that I chose. So when I come in here and say, show me all my receiver IDs or purchase orders, it's going to be filtered by that particular vendor. I'm just going to go and look for a receiver. I have one receiver out there for A1 sheet metal. And if I double click on it, you can see there's 3 line items that have been received for that purchase order. And if I just accept that and load it on my screen, I can now see that the amounts on the purchase order are defaulting in my voucher. It may not be what's on the invoice that the vendor is providing, so let's finish filling what the vendor gave us, and perhaps we'll just put any number in there for the invoice on the vendor's invoice to us, and we'll say that their total amount was $1,500. And notice that our total amount on our purchase orders came out to $1,418. So there is a bit of a mismatch there. I would go and tell it what payable account I want, and here I simply have one that's, I could either search for it or type it in. I'm just going to use my standard account. And when I save this, it's letting me know that the total does not agree with the line item. The totals on my purchase order equal 1418. Now there could be 2 reasons for this. Either the line items themselves are different, in which case I would fill in what the line item is on the invoice, and if in the end it matches that 3-way match that I set up at vendor maintenance, the over 10 and under 20%, then it would be fine. If it doesn't match, then it won't let me save it. Or the other thing might be the extra money is for a shipping charge, so it wasn't related to any individual line, it was just a freight charge, in which case I can add an additional line with that freight charge difference that would also keep things in line. The next feature we'd like to highlight on the financial side is the ability to do cash management, cash forecasting, and projections. So I'm going to go to my cash management window, and the nice thing is you can set up the periods that you want to forecast for how far out you want to forecast to or project out to. You could choose the different accounts that you want to project cash for ins and outs, so that you can do your comparisons. The real nice thing about this is the ability to not only take actual dates on receivables, on your AR, on your invoices, but you can project based on what samples might be. So if you have certain customers that don't pay within the terms that you specify, instead of using that terms date as your cash in date to project to, you can use samples saying that if this customer usually pays 10 days, 20 days late, or whatever the case may be, based on that, it will project that they will continue to follow that pattern and project the cash to be late beyond their terms. Same thing with payables. If you pay late or don't pay by a schedule, you can project your outgoing cash the same way. Customer orders, same thing. We can say whether or not we ship on time or if we ship late. So if we know we're consistently shipping late, while we don't want that to be a pattern, if it is a pattern, we want to project our cash to be reality as opposed to what we hope it would be. And same thing with purchase orders. If we think that we received them on time versus receiving late consistently, we want to manage our cash out the same way. But it's great because it'll let you create those rules for those in and out accounts so that you could project through each period what your cash strategy should be. The last thing on the financial side that we just want to highlight quickly is the report writer window from the ledger. So being able to quickly and easily write your own custom reports is critical. So we have this tool that has a report wizard for someone that understands the ledger and the accounts. They can quickly create balance sheets, income statements. I'm just going to give this a quick name. Call it Nick Bal for my report name. It's a financial report. I can create it from either the financial or the reporting period. And site IDs, so I can do it by site. I have a multi-site database, so I'm choosing all, but if I didn't want to, if I wanted to just do it per site, I can create a balance sheet by site by checking the checkbox in my drop-down. So here I'm going to choose what I'm doing, either an income statement or a balance sheet. I'm going to do a quick balance sheet, and then I can do a current versus budget comparative or current versus last year. I'm going to do versus last year. I don't have a budget set up in my system. And here I'm just going to, I know the account numbers, and most accountants know their account numbers, but you could select it from the list if you wanted to search for it. But I'm going to say I want to go grab my 10,000 account, my total assets, and I'm going to go 2 levels deep on those total assets to my posting level accounts. And over on my liability and equity side, I'm going to grab account 12,000, 1 level deep on that, and 13,000. So I'm grabbing my total liabilities and my total equity. Let me make sure I go 1 level deep there also, so I don't forget. And next, I can create groups if I had a bigger report. I'm not going to do that. I'll just leave it blank, just to show how easy it is just to put something together quickly. And we're going to ready to generate our report. Yes. I can now modify this report here just by adding more accounts or rows or changing it and editing what I have here. But I'm going to leave it the way it is. I'm going to save that, and then I'm just going to go to my print report. And I should see it in my list here now. Here it is, the Nick test. And since I'm in my demo database so we could see some data show up in here, I'm just going to use an old period from my demo database. I'm going to go to 4111. And I can also choose when I'm doing it here whether or not I want to suppress zeros or show detailed transactions with it. I'll just leave it the way it is. I can also put an additional report heading on it if I was going to print this and to send this to somebody if I wanted a more descriptive heading. I'm just going to hit my preview, and there's a quick balance report with my total assets up top, and since I went 2 levels deep, it went down into my posting level accounts, and then my liabilities at the bottom and equity did the same, going 1 level deep. But that's how quick and easy it is to create an income statement using the GL Report Writer tool with the Report Writer Wizard. Next, we're going to take a look at Infor ERP Visual Project A&D functionality. This is a layer that you can run on top of the visual manufacturing toolset, and it gives project and A&D customers the ability to track work breakdown structures and cost by work breakdown structure and different cost codes, and do revenue recognition, and milestone billing. So we're just going to take a quick look and start with creating an estimate for a project. Here you can see where we've developed the WBS structure, the work breakdown structure, the different tasks within that work breakdown structure. And all of that is laid out in this plan. The nice thing about it is if we go and look at what the project in whole looks like, it's designed to look just like the manufacturing window for work orders in Visual. So it's the same type of format, but here we can see the project in full and then each of the individual work breakdown structures along with the tasks for those WBS codes along the way. Likewise, and in this case, this particular WBS code is a work order that gets fabricated as part of this project, and we can look at what that looks like. And now we can see that this is a work order with work instructions and work resources along with materials in the dark green that are used within those structures, whether they are purchased or fabricated. Once we have a project, we can look in the project summary, and this window is nice because I can look at an individual project, or I can look at multiple projects or different types of projects or multiple projects for a specific customer in whole. But here we're just going to look at a single project, and we have a choice of what we want to look at in summary view of those projects. I can look at one of these, like a budget spread, so I can see my budget spread across my calendar, so I can see which months my budgeted amounts are for those individual tasks and work breakdown structures in the project. I can choose to look at any one of these. If I wanted to look at actuals, for example, I can either add it to my budget spread or separate it from the budget spread, so I'm only looking at my actual information. And of course, I can see budget variance, cost variance, and schedule variance. I can look at all of this at once if I want. It just depends on how much I want to dig into this particular project. I also have the ability to look at the status of the project. So now we're looking at a status view, so I could see where things are coming from, where they are, if I want to drill into specific parts of the project. For example, here's a work order that we were looking at from the estimate a little bit earlier. So now I can see how that work order is actually progressing. And now I can see I have statuses with these colored bars going across my materials. So I can get an idea that this project is in process. If I wanted to look at costs just like I would normally, I can look at the actual costs versus the estimated costs for this individual work order, which is a WBS code within the entire project, but it's pulling them all together. So what we're looking at is a list of all of the jobs and all of the work orders associated with that one project, all in one bucket. Of course, this was just a brief overview of Infor Visual ERP. For more details or to see more, contact us at Visual South.